Can you buy property in your self-managed super fund? Let's get into that one a little bit deeper. So I guess firstly, the first answer is yes, you absolutely can, but there are a few requirements that you need to tick off, and there's some pros, some cons, and some mistakes that people often make along the way. So firstly, the requirement is that you need to go out and set up your super fund. Now, in terms of time and how long that actually takes, that can be anywhere from a 3 to 12 week period to set up that self-managed super fund. You need to speak with your accountant, typically a financial advisor. You'll also need to go set up a trust bank account, roll your funds over into that account from your current fund. There are lots of little tidbits and information in between. To get started, you basically need at least $130,000 in your super fund. Now, that can be combined with a family member or a spouse. I guess the common misconception in the market is, for whatever reason, accountants were drilled into it, in yesteryear, that you need $200,000 or $250,000 in your super fund to buy a property. I can categorically say that is not the case. We've bought plenty of property for clients with $130,000, sometimes even less than that in their super. I guess the cons of buying property in your super, firstly, there are establishment costs. There are costs to set up your super fund, and there's also yearly auditing costs. SMSF is one of the most audited products in the financial space, so it's really important that somebody isn't out there doing it on their own and they're making sure they're partnered with an accountant to do that professionally. Initially, you may lack diversity in your super fund. So if you've only got, say, $130,000 in your super fund, you then may only have 5 or 10% liquidity left over sitting as cash and the rest all invested into property. So you may be lacking in diversity at the beginning, but there's some things we can kind of go around that later on. And also, it does come with slightly higher interest rates than lending in your own personal name. On the flip side, some of the pros in terms of investing in your super is that you can control where your fees are going. So I guess my probably biggest counter argument to people who are saying that it's costly to set up a super fund, it's actually quite costly to keep your money in a super fund. Your super fund will typically take about 1.5% to 2% of your total balance in your fund each year. So the higher your fund fees get, the more fees will get taken away. So where in super, it's typically a flat cost. It might increase every year if your accountant increases their fees, but it's not going to increase dramatically. The biggest advantage is that you're using leverage to accelerate your gains. So on average, your typical super fund grows at about 6 to 8% per annum before fees. So if fees are somewhere between 1.5% to 2%, you can do the math, you're probably getting 5 to 6% return in your super. You're going to have some years where you go slightly higher than that. We also had the COVID years where a lot of people lost money in their super in that time as well. Property, you'll typically get about 7% per annum, but you're actually going to be leveraged. You're probably coming in with an 80% LVR, maybe a 70% LVR if you're a bit older. You're still going to be vastly accelerating your return on your investment than you would be just keeping it in a standard fund. The other advantage is that you know where your money's going. I guess a lot of people love the fact when they're investing in property is that they know it's going into a brick and mortar shell. They can do some other things to that property later on, but what they don't like is the anonymity that your typical self-managed super fund goes through. So that's a big pro. The most common mistakes that I see people make when they're buying property in super. So firstly is that people are buying a brand new property or a house and land package type build in super. So firstly, the reason that doesn't work is because people will run in and they'll buy that property for depreciation purposes. Well, that's all well and good if you're buying that property in your own name, and that's a kind of whole segment. I'm not a big fan of house and land packages, but you're only getting depreciation back at 15 cents in the dollar because it's at that self-managed super fund rate, rather than in your personal name. If you're getting taxed at, say, 37.5%, that's different. You're getting a lot more back. In super, it's really not working very hard for you. The second big mistake that people make is that they think they're supposed to hold that property forever. So they buy that property and hold on to it for 20, 30 years and pay it off and get it to debt-free. That's when we're getting into property in super, what we're actually trying to do is we're trying to use that leverage to our advantage. So as that leverage gets weaker, so does the growth rate of that property. So again, that's not the best strategy. And then the final thing is people that are focusing on cash flow for super. So In super, capital growth is key. Nothing else really matters. I guess you can counter argue that you don't want to purchase a property that's so heavily negatively geared that even your employer's contributions, you need to make extra contributions on top of that to keep that property afloat, unless you want to make that voluntary contributions. But capital growth is key. You've gone out and bought a property in super because you're wanting to tap into that leverage. So that leverage is multiplying your capital growth. Capital growth is everything, not cash flow. And there is a very unique strategy. We've been working with very, very high level financial advisors in this self-managed super fund space over the last 12 months to come up with a very unique strategy in which is seeing our clients greatly accelerate their returns in super. If you do have any questions regarding SMSF and would like to know more, please click the link in the description box. Other than that, please follow me on LinkedIn. We'll be posting a lot more data-driven content on there, and make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Bye for now.